morning, Cambodia. Welcome back to Cambodia Business Week. Today we're going to talk about wines. We are going to talk about a particularly very famous wine label. If you've ever seen a wine label with fish bones, I should say, then you've heard of Stonefish. And there's a series of wine labels since then that Peter Papanikitas from Stonefish Wineries has created, which are award-winning labels. And we're going to learn about Peter today. I'm going to learn about also your wine labels. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Cambodia.
Welcome to Cambodia.
Thank you.
Well, if I could ask, what brought you here to Cambodia this trip?
Cambodia is an interesting place where we believe there is potential for Stonefish in this country. And we've agreed, just orally at the moment, with a very good agent, an importer, to bring Stonefish in Cambodia to start building it.
Let's talk a little bit about that label, because that label is a very intriguing label. It's a sort of a fishbone, but very artsy and creative. Yeah. I understand you did that on a napkin.
Totally correct. It was roughly 17 years ago. It was created on a serviette. And what's made that? Sorry, I should say this. What's important about that label is that, and people will say it came from the heart. It was at a time where things were a bit tough. The label was created off a napkin. We launched our first label in year 2000 successfully in a restaurant called The Lagoon, which is a very famous restaurant in Sydney.
It's in Wollongong.
In Wollongong, yeah.
Yes, okay.
And it's owned by the Harrison family. And it was first launched there, and that was 17 years ago, and we have grown a lot since.
Okay, so you have a career in the winery industry, and it goes way back, but let's go as way back as we can. Let's talk about you're Greek. Absolutely.
I was born in a small little island called Simi. I was one when I then went to a bigger island called Rhodes, and I then left with a family 6 years later and arrived in Australia.
If I remember, Rhodes is an island, right?
Absolutely.
The Colossus of Rhodes.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the one.
I've been there. Beautiful place. I could, these are incredibly beautiful places where people all over Europe die to get to during the summer to vacation. And you left.
We left, but I have gone back and at a later time. But Australia's given us an amazing opportunity, and I am the youngest of 8 children, so the family has done exceptionally well in Australia.
A bit of a land of opportunity, Australia has been.
Absolutely, and for that, and I was very fortunate enough to get involved in wine in 1979. And I worked for a very famous company called Lindeman's and then Penfolds.
Before that, you worked with a Greek brand called Metaxa.
No, it was later.
Oh, okay.
So my first job I worked in sales and marketing for Lindeman's,
right,
and then Penfolds, and then Cinzano, and then the famous Greek company after that was Metaxa.
Metaxa, I remember, it's a pretty strong stuff, if I remember.
At one stage, it was the #1 selling brandy in duty-free in the world.
Right.
So it had an amazing following with an amazing reputation. So that was.
It's made in Greece.
Absolutely.
Metaxa.
Yeah,
I remember having it. It's delicious. Absolutely. It's a brandy, right?
Yes, and the Greeks call that the cognac. Well, they can't call it cognac, but you mentioned Metaxa. So Metaxa is a Greek cognac. But all these years working for major corporations. Was a major stepping stone for me to start my own business, and that was in 1991, where I started my own
distribution business, right?
Distribution.
All right, but let's go back a little bit, and because you had this long career in the wine industry, what made you want to be? I mean, what was the passion to say I want to be in this business, the wine business?
Again, finishing university at the time and wanting to find something that I could really enjoy with passion and being able to, as I would say, get my teeth into it. And wine at the time was an industry where it was growing, and I was fortunate enough to apply for this job, and I was actually fortunate to meet the most amazing mentor as such, a guy called Dick Tyrrell, which made my life a lot easier and gave me my first opportunity.
Wine is a very big part of the Australian culture. It's a fantastic industry in Australia as well. So, was it part of that this Australia being a wine culture, it attracted you?
It was, but also at the time the industry was changing. Beer was a major alcohol consumed at the time, but I could see the European influence coming into play, and wine was growing, and I wanted to work for the company that had potential, and that was Lindemans. But later on, talking about passion, and the reason why I got involved in wine, because wine gives you that sort of opportunity to be expressive, but also enjoyment of wine.
Right. Tell us about some of the jobs you've had in the wine industry before you got to the distribution side and before you had your own labels.
Two parts. I was sales and marketing for Lindemans and Penfolds.
Does that mean you have to taste a lot of wine?
No, at the time it was
to watch your liver here a little bit.
It was later. That was later, but at the beginning it was mostly creating branding, brand building, some really good brands. And
so is this going to the restaurants? Also, was it global or was it local?
It was local initially,
Right.
but I was able to then change some labels that are now quite famous, recreate brand building, and that was my major part of my job, but also selling as well, which I love meeting people and selling wine. So it was a combination.
It just sounds like a good job. Meeting people and selling wine sounds like a good job.
It was and still is.
And what does that involve? Is it sort of a daytime, nighttime? You're going to the restaurants, sitting with the owners, or actually, we have it here a lot. We have brands coming here and giving wine tastings, sort of with dinners, and explaining the wine and the region and different types of wines and tastes. Go through a little bit what that meant when you were doing sales and marketing.
The success, I believe, in any business is customer service, but also relationships. And relationships, believe it or not, are normally created after hours, not through the day. Yes, you do see some business, but after hours you go and have a glass of wine or a glass of something, and you create this beautiful relationship with either the owners or the managers or the staff. And that is a major, I believe it's a major reason why we've done so well, because I do a lot of that.
And the staff recommend the wine, so they're a real key part of that. Somebody says, what do you think goes good with this dish? And if the waiter or the waitress knows. And,
Totally correct.
right.
Totally correct.
So you got to educate to that level.
The biggest problem I find with bigger companies, and it's changed now, the arrogance has come in, and I say arrogance where, yes, they do have a big label, but they don't believe that they should go out there and do exactly what they did when they first started. So smaller companies like myself, which I acknowledge even the cleaner at a restaurant, goes a long way of making it work.
But also, how do you get it to the home? Because there's a lot of now, obviously, drinking wine at meals at home is quite popular.
There is, but we've taken a totally different approach with Stonefish, and that is we don't supply to major chains of bottle shops or supermarkets. Most people would think it's silly. I don't, because by having the restaurant on your side, but being able to promote your product by the glass or on the wine list, knowing they will not find that wine in a bottle shop discounted, gives the restaurant a chance to make more money, but also promote a label that's not, and I use the word bastardized, out in the marketplace. And that makes a difference for us, because they will promote our brand instead of the mainstream.
And that's admirable, but aren't you sacrificing quite a bit of profit?
Totally correct.
Right.
I mean, recently we've had two of the biggest companies in Australia approach us for a big amount of volume, and we refused.
This is a principle thing.
Yes, principle, and there's two ways of actually approaching brand building. There's two ways. If in most cases, you've got to take a stand and say, well, I'm going to promote my brand this way. Yes, I'm going to lose market share in some areas. I'm going to lose a lot of volume, but I want the brand to be perceived as being premium in 10 years' time, not a brand that you sell X amount of cases, and then year by year, all the big chains are starting to discount it, and when they've had a run with you, then slowly put it down to the second shelf, third shelf, and before you know it, it's no longer listed. And it happens, and it's happened with some big brands recently.
Interesting. So can we go back a little bit about your also your career with Cinzano and Lindman's? You must have across some extraordinarily interesting people.
I have.
Now, we want to know. This part of the fun of this show is learning about some of the interesting experiences you had, some of the interesting people you met. So let's talk about some of the restaurant owners you met.
But I also met
and customers, of course.
And customers. A funny story. Many years ago in the 80s, in that time the wine was growing, but not to the point where beer was still the major product. So one day I decided
was wine sort of seen as snobby at that time?
No, it was perceived, and I will tell you how it was perceived. So we've gone out with a rep, my manager at the time, to go and see a customer. We've gone to this hotel, and I've said, I'll have a glass of wine, thanks. And the manager said, I'll have a beer. And this 7-foot big man turned around and said to me, "Excuse me, mate, are you gay?" And I went, "Sorry? Men do not drink wine, they drink beer." So that was something that I've always told people when I do presentations about wine, where the industry has gone from being a wine that had no culture to now, if you are drinking wine, you're cultured, and that's what's changed a lot. And it was just one of the stories.
Well, tell us some more.
Again, and I've many things, and I remember I was in I think Hong Kong many years ago, and I've met this chef, and the chef says to me, "So, where are you from?" I said, "Australia." "And what do you do?" I said, "Oh, we make wine." He said, "You don't make wine." He said, "Where's Australia?" I said, "Sorry?" He said, "That's near Bulgaria, right?" I said, "Sorry?" I said, "No." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Sorry." He said, "But I'm American. But I thought Australia was next to Bulgaria." And I said, "No, Australia's actually next to New Zealand." "Oh, and where is that?" There was just some of the people.
Geography lesson.
Some of those things.
You have to forgive us Americans. We I think still about 50% of the population doesn't have a passport. So they're very insular at times. But yeah, I mean, when I was living overseas, I would get I would tell my family I'm in Hong Kong, and some parts of the network of our family and friends sent me a letter once that said Hong Kong, Japan. You know, the city was Hong Kong, but it was Japan. Somehow it got to me in Hong Kong, but anyway.
But I've met some interesting chefs. I think chefs are an amazing breed. Interesting, very talented, very temperamental.
I worked in some restaurants while I was in college, and some really high-class restaurants, and I find them to be the most volatile, I would say, I mean, their passion for what they do, the passion for getting it right, and the passion for cooking and getting a customer experience is unbelievable, but getting there can be quite a journey. Especially if you're the lower staff, like waiters and cooks.
Yes.
It seems like a battlefield most of the time in those kitchens.
It is. And traveling abroad, and as you said, I've been very fortunate, and this industry's given me the opportunity to not only travel, but to meet some amazing people, either chefs or...
Give us a couple of chef stories.
Oh, God.
Who was the most interesting? I use interesting, but let's say volatile or a little bit crazy.
No, there was actually a chef in Sydney many years ago, which there was a table next to me, and they ordered a steak, and the steak, in my view, was cooked quite fine. It was a bit rare, and the customer sent the steak back, and the chef rushed out to the table and said, "If you don't like my food, this I'll cook it, off you go." And I went, "Oh my God." And that was, he took his cooking seriously and just told the customer, "If you don't like it, well, don't come back." So it's one of those rare things I really don't normally see.
Okay, well, your career has been amazing. I think one of the lessons for our audience listening is that you took the experience and many years in the industry and sales and marketing and some other roles, I guess, as well, before you decided to yourself get into distribution and then actually your own labels. So how important, and I'll tell you why I asked this question, because in Cambodia, we have this culture of I want to run my own business. And one of the biggest issues is because there's a lot of family businesses here. People get out of university and very short term in the workforce want to start their own businesses, which unfortunately a lot of them do not succeed because they don't have the experience. So how important to our, and it's good to hear to our Cambodian audience, how important is to get that experience under your belt first? Understand your industry,
Sure.
get different roles and functions that you play so that when you get to that point, you're ready.
There's two major points I advise most of my friends and people that do want to start. Firstly is you need to know the industry before you get involved in that particular field. Either be food or either be wine or something else. You need to know. Secondly, you need to have a plan, a marketing plan or an idea what sort of business you want to be. And thirdly, you need to be structured, and that is financially structured. Many businesses fail because they go into a business with a very, very small amount of funds, not realizing that the business will not operate any profit for at least 6 months to a year, in some cases even more.
That's true.
And while it's traveling and you run out of money, your cash flow becomes short, then you're forced to have shortcuts and other parts of business, and in most cases you'll fail. My advice is make sure you get into a business that you actually like and know a lot about it. Have your financials right. Thirdly, have a marketing plan or a business plan. And fourthly, and the most important, you need to be disciplined and you need to be passionate if you want to be successful.
And discipline is one thing to have passion, but passion could go, it could be directionless because you're very excited about your business. But like you said, being disciplined. And how do people get disciplined? Because I think a lot of this is time management and focus.
Most people will say when you fail in some businesses, you've learned to, from the experience, say, well, I've done this and it was wrong because I rushed. As you said before, I became too passionate about my job, but forgot the structure of the business, and that is the back office sort of things that you need to have. I've made mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes, but I've learned if you want to grow nicely and become successful in business, you need to tick all the boxes, because a lot of people get involved in an idea without understanding that they're going to be facing many problems and hurdles and competition and on. My advice is, as I said before, make sure you know what you're doing when you go in there. Make sure the industry is right. Do your sums. Be cashed up. Have a marketing plan or business plan. Discipline, but still allow for you to be passionate in what you're doing, and especially if you are dealing with the public or with people in general.
So you have a consumer product in the end. So although you deal on let's say on a wholesale level in effect to the restaurants, the retail level is the end customer is the consumer. So building awareness with the consumer in your business is very important.
Absolutely.
And it's not only through since you're not selling in on a big scale in supermarkets or wine shops, let's say, how do you balance that, getting consumers aware with the fact that really they're just going to get it in restaurants or bars?
We've made small adjustments, not many adjustments, in the sense of we have now targeted some selected fine wine shops, very fine, where people are able to actually buy it. And we also have our own website where you can actually buy on.
Oh, your e-commerce.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a great name. It's called Red Wine and Bubbles. And they're able to buy the wine from us at a good price. So we've made some adjustments in reference to that, to to give the consumer a chance to buy.
And I think a lesson learned, because you wanted to keep up the image of the brand, but also extend the reach and distribution and profitability, and it's working. I guess
It's working very well.
Okay. Is online sales becoming a larger percentage?
Absolutely. especially with the younger generation, the younger consumer are now looking online. But you don't want to also make a mistake by trying to actually overcharge. And a lot of people online think, oh yeah, I mean, they don't know the product, and they seem to put a false price on wine, and they can find it somewhere else cheaper. So be careful. Like I said, we try to be as fair as possible, and to give the consumer a chance to come back and buy it again. So we don't make a lot of margin on it. We do make a good margin, but not as much as other people.
Okay, Peter, we're going to take a quick musical break, give you some time to catch your breath. And I think one of the things that I'll get really criticized for if I don't ask about is the wine labels you have, the types of wine you have, what they go with, and when they're going to be available in Cambodia. So we're going to talk wine when we come back, because this is what I'm sure a lot of people want to hear.
Excellent.
So give us a minute to take a quick musical break, catch our breath, refresh, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to Cambodia Business Week. We are talking to Peter Papanikitas, and we're talking about wine today. And in this section, at least, we're going to talk about wine because we went through your career and your philosophy and your business strategy. And now I want to talk about wine.
Yeah.
By no means am I an expert, so we're going to start from the very basics. So the name, as we said, is Stonefish, but you have many other labels.
We do, but Stonefish is the flagship. That's the label that we first started with, and
that was in 2000.
That's correct.
So 17 years later, how many labels do you have?
We have 10.
And some of the more popular ones?
Lost Turtle, which is actually a New Zealand brand. It's a Sauvignon Blanc from Marlborough and a beautiful Pinot from Central Otago. That's a second. The other one is
Shell Bay.
That's more of an entry level wine.
Right.
Garfish is another popular one. Again, another fish product that does exceptionally well. And we've got other brands like Black Pearl.
That's the one that was interesting. The Pirate of the Caribbean ship.
No, again, it was meant to be, and on the label it's actually got a pearl, a black pearl.
Right.
It's an easy name to remember, and it's a product that you will see hopefully in Cambodia. But again, my favourite, apart from Stonefish, is a label called Concetto, and that is a label based on art. And I've purchased some fantastic art in my time, and I've made labels out of that art that I've purchased. They're the major ones that we do quite well, but also little brands which we don't see much of. But Wicked Secrets is a pink Moscato that does very, very well at the Opera House and other parts of Sydney in Australia. And Wicked Thorn. And there's some of the labels that do well, but the big three it would have to be Garfish, Stonefish, and Shell Bay.
Right, so you started in the Lagoon restaurant in Wollongong. Did I say that right?
Wollongong.
Wollongong, okay. And that was your foundation and your basis, and then
that was the launch of the Stonefish label.
Right. And how did you come up with we know how you designed the logo on the napkin, but what type of wine was your first wines?
It was a Chardonnay and a Cabernet Sauvignon and Shiraz, was three varietals. Yeah, a Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Shiraz, or Shiraz, as it's pronounced.
So as part of owning this business, or the MD of this business, did you have your own vineyards, actually? We
have one in Barossa and one in Marg River. And we are about to maybe buy another one. We're negotiating at the moment, but we are also going to have a fantastic cellar door opening in Marg River at the end of October. So then that's another part of building.
I know, I've been through the process of beer, which is very interesting. The process of wines is beer. You basically get the ingredients, and you do your fermentation. You know better than I do. But wines, you sort of it really starts at the vineyard.
Absolutely, and this is something that I think many people don't realise that. And that's why there's also a variance, and it's something which I think the consumer should know. There is a big variance where the wine comes from and what region. For example, in Australia, if you look at the Riverland or the Griffith, part of Australia, and that's more the bulk market. Even though they produce some really good wine, the yield could vary from 11 tonnes to an acre to 14, where the premium regions like Barossa and Margaret River and even Tasmania, you might get from 1 tonne to an acre to maybe 4. So the difference in the grape, mostly when you're getting a big yield, about 14 tonnes, mostly big grape with a lot of water,
Right.
but smaller yield, 1 tonne to an acre, good intense fruit.
Very rich.
Absolutely. And that in most cases, it's a better wine, but also will last longer. So when you go out to the marketplace and you see a Chardonnay, for example, at say $6.99, and then you see another Chardonnay at $29, so well, what's the difference? Big difference. Where it comes from? Has it had any oak treatment? What type of oak? And for how long? So it varies on all those attributes, all those components to actually give you that price point of a wine in a marketplace.
So the birth of the wine industry in Australia, were the grapes local grapes, or did you get them from France?
Many years ago, and I would imagine, I think 1869, around that sort of mark, many years ago. Yes, there were actually clones from France initially,
Right.
and then other parts, but mostly from France.
Right.
And I would imagine from other countries, which we really don't know, but yeah, there were actually clones that were actually brought over by early winemakers.
So the vineyards themselves, what makes it a good vineyard? I guess besides its temperature, water,
Location, soil, and you've got to actually look after the vineyard. I mean, many people have a vineyard, but it's like anything. You know, you make sure you prune it properly, make sure you water it properly, make sure that you just need to look after it. And then when you produce a nice bunch of grapes, or nice,
and is that yearly, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, so it's an annual crop.
It is, and it varies. Like, for example, in the Hunter Valley, you normally get vintage comes about between mid-Jan to say mid-February, and then you move across to Victoria, and again, at the end of January, at the end of February, and then you go south and becomes March. So up the coast you'll find, for example, Margaret, you normally get April to May. So all parts of Australia are different, and totally different to Europe, where you're normally looking at September,
Sure.
and so on.
So once the grapes are picked, I had an Italian grandfather who used to make wine with him. I remember him squashing the grapes and bottling it.
Crushing it.
What's the process?
Again, the grapes are picked, and again, that's a very important part when you're picking the grapes. How far the grapes will actually have to travel. So that's why a lot of vineyards, in most cases, are close to a winery, or close to where you're not travelling too far, because it could affect the oxidize, but also damage is another major issue.
Is it best as soon as they're picked to crush them as soon as possible?
Well, again, they need to be taken to the winery for crushing.
Right, and then it's put in oak barrels. I see this is being.
No, well, again, it's a process of looking at wine in red.
Right.
If you look at Sauvignon Blanc, for example, it's straight from the tank into a bottle. That's probably 80% of the Sauvignon Blanc around the world. It doesn't see oak at all. The French and some other parts of the world, some Italy and that, yes, they do give it maybe a very small amount of oak treatment. But in most cases, Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris, some of those aromatic varietals don't even see oak. Yes, people do use oak in some parts of the world, but not normally. But Chardonnay is one wide varietal they do use oak, which is important.
How long does it stay in the oak?
It varies on price point. It varies on what sort of...
Up to 2 years is...
White wine's not as much. White wine's normally a year, 6 to a year, or maybe sometimes a year and a half, but mostly a year's maximum in some cases. But when you're talking of oak, you normally are referring to reds, and this is where the whole scenario when cost changes.
And then you see those famous movies where people say, "I'll have a 1943 something." How does that work? I mean, when you bottle, you actually have something that's bottled 30, 40 years ago.
Again, it comes back to creating a wine that can last the distance, and you need small yield, and in most cases you might even get maybe half a ton to an acre. And also you need to use the right cork, the right oak that it gets matured in, and being able to actually make a wine that could last that long. Not many people can do that, but there is wines. I mean, in France, even Australia. I mean, we've got some wines in Australia which would last maybe 50, 60 years.
Does wine really age well?
It does, but we've had major problems in the past where we had a cork issue. And where you sometimes think the wine would be great after 15, 20 years or 30, if you're using a bad cork, that isn't the case. But in most cases...
Then you get vinegar.
Yes, you do. And loss of money, of course.
Right, but wine does age.
It does. It does.
And how does that happen?
Again, it's and as they do say, it actually matures in the bottle. Think of an example. If you've got a 3,000 ton tank, and it could stay in that tank, and it would not actually age for quite a long time. But if you put a small amount of wine into a 750 ml bottle, it will age with time, and that smaller it is, quicker it will age. And that's the process of actually aging the wine.
And I know you're a humble man, but I'm going to let you boast a bit. All these awards your labels are getting. The Halliday Awards, 97, it was 2016, 97 out of 100.
That's correct. That was actually our 213 label, which is the Stonefish Icon,
Okay.
small yield from Barossa Valley. My highlight, I think, since starting Stonefish was firstly getting a 5-star rating from James Halliday, which is for me a very important part of marketing for me. Because, I mean, he's actually the god of, he is the wine. I mean, when you talk about wine in Australia, James Halliday stands out. So if he actually gives his approval on a particular wine...
Well, 97 out of 100 is a pretty big approval.
It is. Mm-hmm. So we've had 5-year rating. We have a 97, 95. In the last James Halliday book, we got 3 Cabernets at 95.
And what does that do for demand when you get this kind of rating?
It works, well, it does a lot, especially in Asia, believe it or not. In Asia, they seem to want to know why the wine has got 95 points by Parker or Jancis Robinson or James Halliday. When those big critics, wine critics, are able to put a number or a rating on a wine, the consumers seem to trust it more, and they want to buy it because those people have given it the ratings.
And now 16 countries.
Yes.
And how is this evolving? Because Cambodia is going to be the next one, right?
We'll be 17.
Yeah. And what's attractive to Cambodia? It's because it seems like a smallish market.
It is. For example, when I had a few issues in the States about trademarking, and I can go about trademarking all day, I wanted to still export. So my first market was China. But when I went into China, I found that, the market was not matured enough, and I had some major obstacles. So I pulled out of China, sold nothing, and I went to my first market, and that was Thailand. And I took it slowly, and then it just grew and grew and grew. We're now the number one, based on numbers, I think, in Thailand from Australia. So that's a big market for me. And then from there we grew, we did Fiji and Hong Kong and other parts of the world. But I think as a brand, if you want to become a global brand, you need to also target markets which we believe have potential. Cambodia has potential. We believe...
We drink a lot of wine here.
That's great. But I believe Cambodia, Myanmar, and those sort of smaller markets in the next 10 years, I think have great potential. So
when will the first brand available here will be?
I would imagine about in the next 2 months.
And it will be Stonefish?
It'll be Stonefish.
Concerto?
Maybe not. It will be probably Stonefish, Shorbet, Garfish, and maybe Lost Turtle. So we'll start with 4. We believe that we'll do quite well here. And
it'll be available in finer restaurants?
It will be. And hopefully, and even some nice bars. I mean, I think the market around the world is changing where a lot of wine now is consumed at bars more than restaurants.
We have a lot of bars.
That's good.
Living here is tough because we have a lot of bars, a lot of great restaurants, and wine is generally pretty reasonably priced. So this is another thing. I mean, the price points in certain countries. Is there? You think there'll be any resistance at premium?
No.
levels? No.
Around the world, it's growing. Premium is growing, but there is a problem in countries like Thailand. They've got the highest rate of tax in the world, and that's your next door neighbour. You don't want to go that far. I mean, yes, there's going to be some duties and some cost. I think Cambodia, for me, I've only been with my third time here. I love this place, and I love the people. People are so kind and they really are gentle, which I like, and I think we'll do very well here.
Sure. This is the number one thing people say about Cambodia. Foreigners that come to Cambodia is they love the people, but be careful because most guests we have that come on here that say they spent a little time in Cambodia end up living here.
Really?
Yes, that's a possibility. Well, thank you for your time. I guess the one thing I'd like to ask is your experience in Cambodia. You said you've been here 3 times. What do you find that besides the people, what do you find that you really enjoy and like about Cambodia, and what would you like to see improved?
The mainstream. I travel around the world, and it's all this. It's nice, just a bit of nature, I think, and it's a bit of history, which I'm able to see.
You've been up to Angkor Wat?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But I will. When I do come here, I want to do a bit more.
Next time when you through Thailand, come through Siem Reap,
Okay.
and then come down. It's a great Siem Reap. You'll love it. It's a bit more of a tourist town. A little mini tourist. If you've been in Thailand, there's a lot of tourists, obviously there. But it's a great tourist town. It's a bit more artsy and developing into a little bit of what I would say a little cosmopolitan place. So a lot of restaurants and a more upper class bars. So you'll enjoy it there. And take the bus down. It's only about a 4-hour ride, and you can see the countryside.
I want to do that. I want to spend more time here. Again, I've got some good friends here, which makes it easier. And chefs that I've worked with in the past, or people that I've dealt with. But one thing I will say before, and people ask me about what else does it take to be successful, and that question, and I get that asked all the time. And what I'm going to say is not just a cliche. If you believe in yourself, and I mean really believe in yourself, everything is achievable. And I'm not just saying that. I've done it. People that I've met around the world have done it. So if you want to do something, you want to become the best sportsman, you want to become the best businessman, the best restaurateur, the best winemaker, everything is achievable. And I'm not just saying that. And I think if you believe in yourself, you can do it.
I think I never met a very, very successful person that didn't believe in themselves. Have you?
No.
No. So there you go. It's from experience. Well, thank you very much for being on. It's been a great pleasure.
Pleasure.
And I can't wait to have my first glass of Stonefish.
Absolutely.
Or first bottle.
It'll be a nice Shiraz, I would imagine, and that's what we do.
I'm gonna give you I'll give you a text message and tell you where I am and say which one do you recommend. But anyway.
Fantastic. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much. Thank you.